Hi, my name is Mark Haps, and today we're going to talk about Eucalyptus. What's his name? Eutychus, that's it. There was this guy named Paul, right? He's a disciple, right? Apostle Paul. He was preaching, and he did a lot of preaching all over the place. He likes to throw out Jesus here and there and everywhere. He's just like, Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. And one time he was up in this third story of some building. He's got to leave the next day, so he's preaching he's cramming 55 books of the Bible into one night. And he was going on and on as he usually does. Jesus this, Jesus that, Jesus walked on water, and people are like, oh yeah, okay, we've heard that before, thanks, give us some new stuff. And he's like, okay, I got you. So he starts just preaching like a boss, like the whole time, till it was going on for midnight, and he was like, listen, I looked into the face of Jesus, and I saw him, and there he was. And there's this dude named Eutychus, right? And he's like, he's like, this is really interesting, yet not. Yeah. Yuki falls asleep. Straight up flips and drops straight out the window. 3 stories, mind you. Hits the ground bam, and died instantly. In my mind, nobody even saw it until they heard the thud. Everybody's like, oh my God, Yuki! And Paul's like, oh, nuh-uh, I've got way more to say. We can't be having nobody dying during the middle of me talking. Everybody, let's go. Let's get downstairs, let's go. Paul straight up gets on the ropes like it's a wrestling ring, jumps off to do a body slam on top of Yuki, wraps his arms around him, not quite in the vicinity of safe sanctuary, and says, Yuki, whispers just gently in his ear, Yuki, it's time to go. I got more preaching to do, bro. Pops up, he hops on top of Paul's back. Paul gives him a piggyback ride right back up to the 3rd floor and says, look, let's just not sit by the window this time, okay? Puts him in the front pew, and he's like, okay, cool. And you know what? Let's break some bread, because Yuki's been dead for a little bit. Pops, breaks a little bread and grape juice, probably some grape juice, wine. I mean, this is full-on communion, right?
Wine.
All right, breaks some bread, gives it to Yuki. He's feeling a little better. He says, cool, and Paul's like, I'm not done till the break of dawn.
You can look forward to similar productions all throughout this series as we try to tell some stories that maybe you've never heard of before. How many of you have heard the story of Eutychus before? That was a familiar story to you. Anyone? No one? Only you? Interesting. You had heard it? Way to go. Thanks, Justin. I appreciate that. So it's not a very common story. It only appears once in the Bible. A lot of times people are referred to several. Let me back up and give you all some more room there. A lot of times characters are referred to several times, and this is the only place that we see Eutychus, or Yuki as David referred to him as. He does not appear any other time. So we did get a good telling of that, but I would like to read the actual story to you so you get kind of the full version of what really happened. Well, that was great. So this is, the heck is going on in there? Yeah. So we're in Acts 20 is where this story happens. So if we're in Acts, this is the Acts of the Apostles. The apostles are going around, and particularly right now, Paul is going around. He has been visiting different congregations, traveling city to city and preaching. And so this is Luke's telling of the Acts of the Apostles. So here we are in chapter 20, starting with verse 7. On the first day of the week, as we gathered together for a meal, Paul was holding a discussion with them. Since he was leaving the next day, he continued talking until midnight. There were many lamps in this upstairs room where we had gathered. A young man named Eutychus was sitting in the window. he was sinking into a deep sleep as Paul talked on and on. And when he was sound asleep, he fell from the third floor and died. Paul went down, fell on him, and embraced him, then said, "Don't be alarmed, he's alive." Then Paul went back upstairs and ate. He talked for a long time, right up until daybreak. Then he left. They took the young man away alive, and they were greatly comforted. So we did a decent job, right? That was pretty much right on.
Yeah.
It was a little more entertaining than me just reading it. Yeah, the piggyback, we took liberty with the piggyback thing. But so this is a really cool story that, like I said, it just appears once. And I was struck this morning while I was thinking about it that, Acts, Luke writes all of Acts. And all of Acts is the telling really of Paul's story, but also Paul moving around and preaching in different places. And then we get another version of that when Paul writes his letters, right? And he's recounting and talking to all of the people, all the congregations that he's visited. And I found it funny this morning that Luke makes sure that it is known that Paul literally preached and bored someone to death. And Paul never made mention of it anywhere in any of his letters. He made sure that it was not left. But Luke made sure that it was in there in Acts. And I wonder tonight, as we look at this lesson, we look at this story, what it is that puts you to sleep so easily. I want just honest answers. How many of you have fallen asleep in the choir loft on a Sunday morning? Right? More than 5 times. Whoa. I appreciate your honesty, but that was, you threw yourself under the bus on that one. I wonder what it is that makes us fall asleep. How many of you struggle in class? Right? There was literally, I can tell you that stay with me. My freshman year of college, I think I've shared this before, my first class ever in college was Old Testament 1. I spent an entire year in the Old Testament as a freshman in college, and it was at 8 a.m. Monday, Wednesday, Friday. 8 a.m. is early in college, people. We were talking early. And I can still go back and look at my notes, and you can see where it would start here, and it would start to slant down as I would fall asleep and continue writing as I took notes. We struggle sometimes keeping our interest. I wonder on Sunday nights how much you might struggle keeping interest when myself or Derek or Lee are teaching. But tonight we look at this story, and here's what we know about this story. This was a normal congregation that Paul would go visit. When they talk about they met on the first day of the week, they were coming together on a Saturday night. Or the last day of the week, they would come together on a Saturday night and they would celebrate a feast. That's what they did. They got together on a Saturday night and they would eat a big meal together. And this Saturday night was special to them because they had a visitor who was going to come and teach to them. And so they were there, they were having their regular meal, and this guy comes in and is teaching to them. And it says, it's funny that this is all it puts in there, but in Acts 20, all it says was Paul was holding a discussion with them, which sounds like he was just having like conversation. But really, when we look at the Greek there, if we look back throughout Acts, what we know is that Paul had been traveling from city to city, preaching this same message. It was almost like he had gone on tour to preach this one little message that he had, that this series that he was doing, if you will. And the series that he was doing, ironically enough, was that the importance of the resurrection of the Messiah. So Paul was going around preaching how important it was that Jesus had died and been resurrected. He was going preaching this message from community to community. It wasn't just a discussion they were having. He was preaching. He was teaching to them. He was showing them the importance of what was going on in this gospel message. And so I imagine Eutychus sitting in the back of the room, and he's sitting on the windowsill, which says something about this kid to begin with, right? Probably everybody else was sitting kind of in a congregation like this, listening to Paul. They had been having meals, so they're all around together, and Eutychus is not up with everybody else. Maybe it was that the room was just really crowded, but maybe Eutychus was like, I don't even know if I really want to listen to this. I kind of want the out of being in the back, that maybe I could just stargaze while this guy is talking. Maybe I need something to distract myself, and I'd rather be in the very back of the room where it'd be easy for him not to see me. Maybe I'm not sure I really want to hear the message that he has for us tonight, but I want to come because there's a meal, and it's chicken tenders tonight, and that's pretty good. You get it? It was tonight we had chicken tenders. Thanks. Just making sure everybody had not died in this room. Chicken fingers, tenders, whatever. So Eutychus is sitting in the back on the windowsill, like I said, which I think says something to his character. He wasn't fully present in that situation. And as Paul is preaching on and on, all of a sudden, Eutychus falls asleep and falls out the window. Did you forget that part from earlier? What? That's just... So maybe it was that it was really warm. They make note that it was probably warm in the room. Maybe Eutychus was really full, like he had had a big meal, so it was a little easier to be tired. Maybe all of those things were right. Maybe he hadn't slept in a while because Derek pointed out earlier in his lesson, I didn't know this, but Eutychus was a common slave name, so maybe he was tired from being in labor all day long. But for whatever reason, he starts falling asleep. Personally, I think it was because he wasn't really invested in what was going on. Just like sometimes we can be sitting in a sanctuary or in a Bible study or in this room and really maybe not be fully bought in or fully present with what's going on and what Davis or somebody else is teaching. And so he falls out the window and dies. Literally, as Paul is talking about the importance of a man dying and being resurrected, a kid falls out a window. Paul runs downstairs, resurrects the kid, and they come back in, and he continues preaching. Now, for me, being a preacher, I kind of think like, whoa, he just got the best sermon illustration ever, right? This kid died as he's talking about Jesus dying and coming back to death, and there's probably some people in the room saying like, I wonder if that really happened. And then literally it happens right before their eyes. I think for me, that's the biggest aha moment in this story. Because as I was reading this story, I was kind of reflecting and I was thinking about certain points in my own faith walk. I was thinking about when I was 17 and I was on breakthrough for the second time. And I was just so excited for the fact that God was going to come alive for me and tell me all these great things. And all that I felt like I heard that weekend was silence. And I reflect back on being in college and studying the Bible so deeply and struggling to really believe some of it. And I remember and I reflected on being in seminary when I was struggling with things going on in my life and my mother being sick at the time. And I was just wondering, like, God, is this all just real? Could you please make some of this happen? I see and I read about you performing miracles, and I would really love to see one happen now. And I wonder if Eutychus was kind of sitting in that same place of saying, God, this guy's babbling on, but all I really want is to see these words become real and true in my life. Would you make that happen in my life? And I'm not saying that God made Eutychus fall asleep so he'd fall out the window and that Paul would go resurrect him. But how cool was it that literally the passage, the idea that Paul was trying to teach came alive for that room. As he was teaching on that very thing happened. And I have to think for all of those people, that had to have been a huge aha moment. Like, this really is real, because God was making the Bible come alive for them. He was making it become a reality. And young people, I don't know what place that you're in tonight. Like I said, I've been in a lot of different places in my faith walk of struggling and wondering what the heck is going on in this book and what God is doing in this world. But I can tell you that as you enter those places, even if you don't think that you see it, even if that you don't think that it's happening, God is making this stuff become alive in your life. I think one of the biggest things that we lack at times is the confidence or the boldness to ask God to do that. And I wonder where some of you are tonight, and whether you're bold enough to say, I don't know if all these things that Adam talks about on Sunday night are real or not, and maybe I'll just show up because I get food and then I get to go hang out with my buddies. But I would kind of like to see some of this become real in my life, because maybe I really need it to become real. I encourage you tonight, as you leave this place, to start asking and praying bold prayers. There was a time when I was in seminary when I stopped praying for a long while because I just wasn't confident in prayer anymore. And when I started praying again, a good friend of mine just said, why don't you just pray really boldly and be as straight up as possible with God? So I started doing that, and God started showing up in really amazing ways. And it was because for me, for the first time, I think I started getting really honest with God about saying, God, I want you to make this stuff become alive in my life. I don't want to just hear some stories. I want to be a part of your stories. I want to be a part of your good news, be a part of your gospel. So tonight I encourage you to go pray bold prayers. Ask God for this book to become alive to you. If you're sitting on the windowsill wondering what the heck any of this has to do with your life, I think that's the sign that you need to start praying those bold prayers, that maybe God's nudging you to do that. Let's pray as the band comes back up. Gracious and loving God, we give you thanks